I'm really excited about this conversation. I know this has been a work in progress and brainstorming for a long time. We're not here so much to debate about AI, but really talk about the implications it has on art and design practice and all sorts of other fields, but really explore some really critical contemporary context of what this means in humanity today. And I will say, and it's not just because I'm the president of an art school, but I do firmly believe that never has there ever been more value in creatives in the creative process in the age of AI than now. Creatives bring uniquely human perspectives of critical thinking and critical agency, complex problem solving, non-binary critical thinking skills that are very, very paramount to the future of work and to the future of humanity. And and here at CIA, we are here to provoke conversations and to learn and to continue to learn from each other and to continue to be students ourselves. And in this particular time, I personally am not pro AI, but I am pro learning. And with that, I stand by our institutional values, especially of that of inclusivity and accessibility and responsibility. The responsibility that any AI integration that we have, whether it's in the curriculum or in the business operations, is done ethically and responsibly. And also that we manifest our values, inclusivity and accessibility to ensure that our students do not get left behind amidst the digital divide. So it's a very interesting time. Of course, AI brings a hotbed of risks and ethical challenges, environmental challenges, but it also brings unique opportunities. So I'm excited to learn from the varied perspectives of our panelists today, and I thank you for your time and your attention. And just a couple quick housekeeping things. After this important conversation, we invite you to stay. We are having a reception. Please stay for that. Continue that conversation. And then after that at 8:45, as part of the Cinematheque here in the Peter B. Lewis Theater, we are hosting our final series of the Moral Machines, Synthetic Souls series, which is all about cinematic representations and implications of AI in the cinematic medium. And the specific screening is called So Unreal. It starts at 8:45. So if you want to continue to apply what you're hearing today and put that in context, I invite you to stay for that screening as well. So enjoy the conversation, and thank you again, and please come back.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you all on this wintry evening. My name is Zach Savich. I'm a professor of liberal arts. Special welcome to the students who I see here at a busy time of the semester. My preparation for this is guided by the privilege of working with them every day, seeing them approach problems that matter with such creativity and integrity. And I think that will guide the spirit tonight. Thanks again to Catherine for the welcome. I'd also like to especially thank Kari Weaver from the Nord Center for Teaching and Learning and Nikki Woods from the Reinberger Galleries and all the gallery staff for all the help with this. And most of all, thank you to the panelists who are here tonight. You can read more about them in the program. In short, we're joined by Shannon French, who's the Inamori Professor of Ethics at Case Western Reserve University, Kevin Mowrer, a CIA alum, who's the principal at Mowrer Metastory and the CEO of Meaningful Fun. Next to Kevin is Ashlei Watson, who's the Director of Academic Planning at the College of Creative Studies. And at the end, we have David Foster, an Associate Professor at the School of Media and Journalism at Kent State University. Let's welcome them, thank them for being here tonight and for what we're about to get into. I want to thank them especially for all their time with planning. First off, it's a good sign whenever people are willing to meet and plan, and it's an especially good sign for a panel when the planning meetings threaten to overwhelm the time you allotted for the panel itself. That is to say, the conversations have been fantastic already, and I know there's a lot we're going to get into tonight. When I say AI, we see many things. I think every day I read something that changes my own thinking about the topic. Everyone in here, as soon as you say it in a room, things come into the room that ring a lot of different chords. Our main focus tonight will be on AI and ethics, thinking about how we can think about how to act, be, and proceed in the era of artificial intelligence. The goal is to surface a lot of different perspectives and ideas. We're not going to resolve things, but we're going to introduce many things that I know we're going to carry forward in classrooms here in the months ahead. And most immediately, I hope you'll join us in the reception afterward to talk to the panelists, ask more questions, and make connections with other folks who are here. Thank you for being here. To start, I'd love to just ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their backgrounds and perspectives, and also to give us some sense of the ethical concerns they have about AI. In other words, what aspects or applications of AI cause you the most ethical concern and why? And could we just go down the line with that and with introductions and an overview of some concerns? Thanks, Shannon. Let's start with Shannon. Thanks.
Hello. Oh, there we go. You shouldn't give me a mic like this because it's like, I want to start singing. I might later. We'll see. Anyway, as you heard from the introduction, I am an ethicist. I am a professor of philosophy. And I should also say that perhaps as my role on the panel, but I'm very much an AI skeptic. So you're going to hear those kind of perspectives from me. But it's a field that I work in quite a lot. I teach a course that I've taught for a few years now called Ethics in AI and Emerging Technologies. And I have worked extensively in this field, not only in the academic and private sectors, but with the US military. Before I came to Case Western Reserve, I taught at the US Naval Academy, and I still have a lot of connections and contacts with the military. So issues about use of these kinds of technologies come up there as well. The two things that I would highlight as worrying me the most, or the two words that come to mind, are the words exploitation and the word dehumanization. The first one is very striking to me because, unfortunately, the history of the development of some of the tools that are best known to most people, like ChatGPT, for example, out of OpenAI, a lot of folks in just the general population have no idea that tools like that, in order to be created and vetted and so forth, exploited workers in the global south. And there's some incredible background there, which I'm happy to say more about. But in short, these tools were constructed with the very painful, indeed traumatic labor of people who were paid very little to, for example, look at the darkest, most disturbing corners of the dark web and mark some materials as not suitable for training these large language models on. And we then get the final product without recognizing that labor or indeed the suffering that came with it. More broadly, I think there's quite a lot of exploitation, which I know will come up in our conversation, in terms of exploiting artists and other creators and not giving them credit or any kind of recognition. And furthermore, this dovetails into my other word, dehumanization. Removing humans from the things that make us most human is, I think, dangerous for us all. So that includes critical thinking. It absolutely includes the arts and other creative endeavors. And in my view, most of the uses of AI are actively bad for humanity. There are exceptions, and I will talk about those as well, but for the most part, I think that it is the wrong direction for us to be going, and there's far too much AI hype.
Just checking to see, is it working? Okay. So I think I'm the only one up here who's actually going to turn on a slide, which is macabre when you think about it because I'm the artist on the panel. But my background is I actually work in the business of entertainment, and I do a thing that's called metastory. So I work with many of the big studios and the big entertainment companies out there, like DreamWorks, Universal, Warner Brothers, Mattel. The list kind of goes on and on. I won't bore you with it. But what my business is I work with those companies to dive into their stories and to understand what their impact is on humanity, whether they're relevant or not, open them up, restructure the story, and turn it into something that's even bigger, right? Everybody wants a franchise. And that's what I do, is I turn movies into franchises and TV shows into franchises and games into franchises. And I've had the great honor of doing things like working, as an example, a lot on How to Train Your Dragon. So it's a cool movie. I love it. So let's dive in on the AI question here and see if I can get this thing to work. Oh, here we go. So I do believe that there are quite a number of troubling aspects about AI, but I also want to be very open that I am a fractional CEO of 2 different companies that are making hybrid product. So what's hybrid product? It's a digital product that is also in a physical form, meaning, it does something physically. It's not just a device that you hold in your hand, right? Both of those companies, we have been working in using AI in both of those companies for 6 years, right? However, we started using AI back when it wasn't large language model AI. I don't know how many of you know this, but we've all been living with AI for about 25 years. It's called social media, right? If you take a look at the impact that social media has had because it's curative AI, right, and the algorithm and so forth, I give it a D minus. Overall, the impact has been awful. The destruction of truth, right? The decline of democracy all around the world. Children, specifically even girls, much less safe as a result. I could go on and on. But, yes, there's been a fun side to this, and this is something we need to recognize and understand, that there are very big companies out there who want to make a fortune, who are creating things, and this is where I think the new LLM is. It is a solution in search of a problem. So what do you do when you have a solution in search of a problem? You get people to believe in the problem that you create. Better get on this bus or it's going to run you over, right? I hear that a lot. Oh my God, you better retrain or you're not going to have a job. I hear that a lot. We could go on and on, but you get the idea. There's a lot of mythology that is built, mythologizing, that happens around rolling out something that didn't have a specific thing it was solving for. They need your complicit. You need to be complicit in making that business plan work or the bubble pops. You've heard a lot about the bubble, right? How's the bubble work? You get a big company that you form up, you need billions of dollars, you get those loans for the billions of dollars, and you promise quick returns. And the quick returns don't happen, and you get more billions of dollars. Now it's hundreds of billions of dollars. And you make more promises, and guess what? AI is not living up to those promises. MIT just completed a study that showed that better than 85% of all companies that brought in AI, that it either was of no benefit or it was of a negative benefit, which means it was a problem. It cost them more money. They laid people off. They had to hire them back in at higher salaries. Their end result was less creative, less insightful. It did not drive the business that they needed. So there's a number of reasons for this, and let's see if we can unpack a few of those. Because there's misunderstandings that are all over the place when it comes to AI, and these are the things that trouble me about it. Right? First off, Everyone talks about AI and compares it to tools. Oh, it's like Photoshop. Oh, it's like the advent of the camera. AI is not a tool. It is an agent. It is sold as an agent. So what is an agent? An agent is, when you have agency, what you do is you see something, you ingest the opportunity or the problem, you think about it, you make a decision, you take an action, and you change an outcome. Right? That's what your agency is. When you use an AI for certain things, you're handing over your agency. This is part of the concern that you expressed, right? So what does our agency do for us? If I specifically talk about the world of creative, it is in the minutia of struggling with every detail of what it is that you are creating where you become an artist. It grows your skill, it changes your brain. It's there that you find the insights that allow you, because what are we doing as artists? We're creating narrative. All art is narrative. And what is narrative? Narrative is human change, right? And why is that important? Because it's the way we change everything when we're humans. So we need to think long and hard about, do we want to hand over that agency, right? I find that, frankly, to be something, the answer is no, right? Also, AI is not a single thing. We could talk for hours that AI is many, many different things. I actually believe there are places AI is brilliant, right? So what is AI? AI is a probability machine. So anything that you can do better because you can find the most probable answer based on massive amounts of data, AI might actually excel at. Differential diagnosis for doctors. They're discovering AI does that better. If I have cancer, I want that, right? I want the best differential diagnosis I can get. Science, there's so many places in science where it's about the probable. Let's go over here to anything that is creative. The province of creativity is improbability. So if we apply AI to the things that are improbable, and it is a probability engine, it is not an improbability engine, what are we doing? Well, we're making things that are derivative. We're making things that were about now and what was, and we're making things based on the database that comes from AI, right? We talk for hours about what that database is. What was it trained on, right? Well, it was trained on the internet. What is the internet? It is the business model of anger. It is. The algorithm discovered that the thing that you look more at than anything else are the things that make you angry. No one decided that. The algorithm discovered it. But what they did discover is if they push more of that content and get you more angry, they make more money from the ads and from what they sell about the information they get about you to other people. It's trained on the algorithm of anger. It's trained on porn, and it's trained on, this is not just my opinion. You can read about it and look it up. There is so much content that is now AI, that is unclaimed AI on the internet. We're looking at more than half of the content that is not real. So how do we chart our way into the future if everything we're looking at is not real? We have disconnected ourselves from our ability to make all of those tiny, tiny little decisions that roll up to be the big decisions, that roll up to the creativity that we do and the decisions that we make that make us who we are and make us who we are human. And we've stepped away from that. To be honest, we've already stepped away from it. The internet is not a place of truth anymore. Have you guys heard that Gen Z is now leaning into this trend that's called raw dogging reality? You heard this? They're starting to recognize how toxic and bad it all is, and they're literally going complete off of social media. So where's that going to go, right? Is that going to spread to the rest of us? I don't know, you know? Maybe. Sorry, I'll hold this a little closer. So, see, I got ahead of myself down here. So it turns out I actually didn't need that, but we'll click through it so that it's up there for you to look at. There was also another study that was done by MIT that was on brain development, and this is something that you can look up. And I'll give you the top line. But first, I don't want to be a bad writer. I want to be somebody who gives the proper credit here. This was by Natalia Kuzmina, who is a researcher at MIT, and the results were so concerning, she published them before peer review, and it's now under peer review and being proven to be true. And the upstart is she tested some very critical thinking amongst a whole series of students, some who didn't use AI, some who used it for a search, and some who used it for the critical thinking. And the results for the ones who didn't were the best. The ones that were the worst were the ones who used AI. But here's the concerning part, is they did brain scans. And it turns out the more you use AI, the less engaged your brain is with the subject. It literally doesn't light up nearly as much. So how do brains work? The more they do a thing, the more they wire to do that better, and we grow. We become something more. And the less we do a thing, the more those connections fade. And what she found was, even for a period of time after using the AI, laziness, lower brain engagement, and less understanding of the subject persisted. So again, we need to think long and hard about, where are we going to use AI? There's places I believe it can help us. We will be talking about, I'm sure, some of the ethics of the impact on the environment, and we'll go there. But just from a usage standpoint and a human standpoint, my concerns are similar. That I think in the companies where we're using AI, we're only using it in those places where it computationally can do things and help the product to do things. We have created a bright red line that says we do not use the AI in the act of creation, critical thinking, art, and insights. Because that's important to come through humans, for humans, because AI isn't a living human, and we find insights are not just data, they come from life experience. And that's important for us to support that. So finish up here. Right? We already talked about the destruction of truth. And we already talked about the crisis for human storytelling. So I'm going to pass this along. That's the top line of my major concerns about AI and using AI in anything that involves true human critical engagement, where you need the non-linear thinking and you need a human to do that thing.
Hello. Can you all hear me all right? Thank you all for coming. This is very exciting to be here. So my name's Ashlei Watson. I work at the College for Creative Studies, which is in Detroit. It's also an art and design institution like CIA. I began learning about AI a little more than 5 years ago. I worked with a gentleman named Dr. Paul Pangaro. He was our chair of interaction design for graduate studies. And Paul left CCS to go to Carnegie Mellon. And when he was there, he met a researcher by the name of Dr. Jill Fain-Lehman, and she had been a computer scientist and a language development expert many years. And she had a very strong interest in AI, and Jill thought that the way it's being done now is the wrong way. And so she and Paul had a lot of conversations. Paul's cybernetics guy, interaction design. Paul knew I liked to write. And between the two of them, they concocted this plan of how they could develop Jill's notion of what AI should be versus what it is now, and how they could get that out to the public. And they thought, speculative fiction is probably the best way to go. So Paul calls me. It's, again, more than 5 years ago. And he wants me to sit down with him and Jill and co-write a novel about AI, which I know nothing about. And I think, okay, let's give this a shot. I have learned so much from that experience. What we grounded these books on is this notion of sentience versus sapience, right? So sentience is something that is not available in our large language models that we have today. Large language models are not grounded in time. They're not embodied. They don't have the senses that we have. This is very, very important when you consider meaning. And so Jill's idea was to have an individualized AI that would actually grow with an individual. So you put it on a child, and again, this is speculative fiction, so this is in the future. And you put it on a child, and this AI grows with the child, and it develops as almost a safety feature, but it's another voice in their head. So it's almost like an internal monologue dialogue that you're having with yourself, but it's your AI. I say all of that because through the discussions we ended up a series of 2 books on this. We went down many, many pathways about the consequences of AI in life. And she wanted to create very much a distinction between the 2 types of AI. So we have both in the books. And we talked about what each could do and what each could not do. And again, every week for 5+ years, we now have 2 books. And this brought me to, I'm working at CCS, and they asked me to create the institutional statement with a working group, to lead a working group to do that on AI. So delved even deeper into it, but in more of the art and design area, lots of research there. Added to all of this, my first job, I joined the military right out of high school. 6 days out of high school, I went into basic training, and I was an interrogator. It was my job in the Army. Now, that sounds much more impressive than it was. It was the Clinton years. I mowed lawns in Texas, is what I did for most of my 4 years. But I did get training in interrogation at a very pivotal time in my life, right? I was still 17 when I graduated, so I was out of the Army by the time before I hit 22. And I went through this training in interrogation, and interrogation is all about approaches, right? So you have somebody in front of you, and depending on how you see them and their psychological makeup, you determine how you're going to ask your questions and how you're going to get information out of them. And they have, pride and ego up and fear down, and all these different names for these different approaches. But what it taught me at this time in my life, I was 18 at that point, was that it is actually easier than one would hope to manipulate someone else, and the ethical implications of that manipulation, and what you can do to a person if you actually know how to do that well. So put all of those things together. So working with Paul and Jill, my time in the military, and this sort of basic thing that I learned at the age of 18, which really changed my view of people and society and culture moving forward into my adult life. And then add to it working at CCS, the art and design element. And that brings me to my biggest concern when it comes to AI. And that is that when you gather so much data on an individual, it's not just what the politicians have right now are the marketers with your demographics, right? I'm a suburban white woman of a certain age with a child, et cetera. It's not just that. AI can follow you, right? That's what we were talking about with social media. If you have all these data points about a person, and then you feed it into AI, a nefarious actor could then manipulate society. It's digital authoritarian. I'm going to not be able to say this word now. Thank you. Authoritarianism. That is definitely a possibility with AI because of the data that's being collected on all of us, whether we know it or not. Right now, surveillance is becoming, I think, the biggest concern for all of us. And so that's my biggest worry with AI. But I have a different opinion than Kevin on some of these troubling aspects. So I'm excited to get into that. Thank you.
We're still at the introduction phase, right? Okay, just double checking. Hi, I'm Dave Foster. I'm from Kent State. I teach in both the journalism program and in the visual communication design program. So I feel like I'm almost split in my both use and understanding of AI, especially as an instructor and as someone who's trying to motivate creative people. In the journalism program, obviously my fears are misinformation, the usage of deep fakes and things like that. But in visual communication design, I've really tried to find pathways for students to be able to at least explore it. I saw a comment for this program on Facebook. It said that the title sounds like an oxymoron, AI and ethics. And I was like, yeah, I could see how, ethics aren't laws. It isn't a set rule that we have to follow. And I think a lot of what students are trying to figure out, and other professors and myself are, what are my personal feelings and how am I going to incorporate this into my daily workflow? And, I think we could look at a corporation like Amazon and evaluate the ethics of that company, but people still use it every day. And I think it reminds me of what the Dr. Strangelove was the subtitle of that film, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I feel like that is the underlying subtitle of AI, is how we're it's here. None of our ethical concerns are going to stop the development of it. We have a massive population of students that are going to be potentially displaced by this tool, but we're trying to also encourage its use so that they're familiar and able to adapt to it. So I think we have we could take it a million different directions, from environmental concerns to the workplace. So I'm excited to get started.
I said a lot was going to come up. There's so much I'd love to follow up on already, but I think it's actually a great transition to our next prepared question. And I wonder if I could invite Shannon to respond to this first, both from your academic perspective and as it relates to professional ethics in the military, and then others can follow up. When we think about ethics, when I think about the ethics courses I took, often that focuses on established codes, on professional norms. You might think of medical ethics or journalistic ethics and so on. In many cases, AI is changing the fields and contexts that those norms emerged from, that gave birth to those codes. Medicine and journalism, for example, as folks have mentioned, are different because of AI already. So I'm curious, what does that mean for ethical compasses that might guide our use of AI? In other words, in fields that you're familiar with or in general, what can guide ethical conduct when things are changing in major ways and at a rapid rate? So maybe we'll start off with Shannon on that and see who'd like to follow up.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great question. So since I have worked in military ethics, many times, I've had people say, with regard to some new technology, but this is before, this is pre-AI, but I've had people say, such and such has been developed. Do we need brand new military ethics? And there are entire books that take this as a premise, very many of them as it happens. So you'll get like, now we need entirely new ethics because of, for example, the drone program or something like that. What I always end up answering is that, quite simply, no, we don't. And the reason for that is, I think, fascinating and, in a way, somewhat reassuring. That is the fact that human nature itself is remarkably, perhaps some would say disturbingly, stable. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that there's a reason that we can read ancient Persian poetry and know what it's talking about and feel it. There's a reason you can hear something from Shakespeare or work from any country, any culture, any place, any time. And it resonates with you across all of those centuries, or even, again, works that are millennia old. And that's true, again, for other arts as well. And the reason for that is that we, as human creatures, haven't changed all that much. I'm not suggesting we haven't made any moral progress. I actually think we have. I'm particularly glad we don't have the Roman arenas anymore. Those were horrible. But we sadly still do have slavery, but we need to keep working on that. But in any case, what I'm talking about is that the basis of ethics is about how to live a good and meaningful human life. And those questions don't change. And it is also true that ethical guidance tends to circle back around to the key way that people go wrong when they do terrible things, which is that they make an exception for themselves. So whether you look at some of the thinkers that people normally refer to, like Immanuel Kant or Aristotle or any Martha Nussbaum, many of the ethicists that have made these points, what you're going to find over and over again is the notion that when we decide that we can do something that we would not be comfortable with universalizing to all of the human race, then we go wrong. So the rules that guide, for example, military ethics, which are largely encompassed in this big sphere that's called just war theory or the just war tradition, deal with those issues in a way that are completely still relevant in the age of AI and in any new technology as long as humans are around. Because, for example, one of the core principles of just war tradition is something called distinction or discrimination, although that can confuse people. But it's about determining who you can or cannot target with lethal force. And the equipment, I know you're pointing out that AI isn't merely a tool, but the tools and equipment that we use to target people may change. But who we're allowed to target and who gets excluded from that category is, again, remarkably static. And the responses that people have had in a panic to new technology is, again, something we see echoed throughout history. Somewhat hilariously to me, you only have to look back to any distance weapons to find people freaking out in the past. And one quick case that I like to tell people is one of the earlier popes, Pope Innocent II, declared the crossbow an evil and ungodly weapon because it could shoot from a distance. And many would argue because it disturbed the status quo by allowing a foot soldier to kill a knight. Well, now we have weapons that range from, as I mentioned before, drone warfare to elaborate systems like the one that was used by the IDF recently called Lavender, which was a targeting system that include these new technologies. But at the end of the day, they still have to reckon with the same core questions about who can you ethically target and who can't you. That part hasn't changed. The type of killing, how you kill, may change, but not these core questions. And with that point in mind, I actually want to refer back to something that you were saying a minute ago about effectively this concern you hear a lot that AI is here to stay, for example. I also hear it a lot as the genie's out of the bottle. You can never put a genie back in the bottle. And to that, I would say, well, first of all, always remember that genies are bad. The genies try to trick you. When you do wishes with genies, they're always going to try to mess up whatever you wished for and twist it into something negative. So if the genie's out of a bottle, look out. You want to make sure that it's not going to twist your intentions and compromise your humanity. But I would also say that, interestingly, it isn't actually true that humans have never looked at a technology and gone, ew, and put it back away again. We actually have done that historically. And one of the core examples does, again, come from military ethics, and that is that after the horrific use of chemical gases to kill people in mass numbers during World War I, effectively the whole world said, let's not do that again. And after the US used nuclear weapons at the end of World War II, I mean, we're all kind of on the edge of our seats every now and again still today, but nevertheless, it still hasn't been done since then because, again, everyone was shocked. We do have thresholds that shock us, and we don't always say because it exists, we must use it. But that said, I come back to the point that you were making earlier, that there's AI and there's AI. There are different kinds of AI. There are different uses for AI. And while I think the same ethical rules apply that have always applied, I think that there are some that might pass muster, and those are the ones that are used more as tools and less as agents, because I do ascribe agency only to human actors.
That's fascinating. David, I wonder how you think about this in terms of journalistic ethics and questions of what might be durable around ethical practices and what might be durable but changing in how it's implemented. And I'm thinking about things around representation, sourcing, facticity, those types of issues.
I mean, I think in terms of journalistic ethics, that not much has moved the needle there. I mean, decades ago, we started using computers to automatically write obits. So obituaries were something that we realized that were rather formulaic, and we could kind of crack that. Especially with photojournalism, which is what I teach primarily. Our National Press Photographers Code of Ethics states do not add, alter, or include anything that would, manipulate or misrepresent the subject. So it's pretty clear cut there. But that's, I think, what I love about teaching is that I don't just teach photojournalism. I'm also teaching creatives. I'm doing an architecture photography class where we're using Adobe AI tools to remove things that otherwise would be distracting elements from a photo. So I think it really has become a sliding scale on the creative side. So I think there's some flexibility there. And journalistically, I think that it's more concern than implementation.
Would others like to speak to this question of ethics in professions and that balance between what's static or durable and what might be changeable?
I'd like to speak to that just a bit, and I'd like to unpack it a bit as in specific industries, because I do agree that the blueprint for human ethics is something that seems to have developed quite well over millennia, right? And that is durable, and thank goodness that is durable. In the businesses that I'm partly in the tech business and partly in the entertainment business, there's something a little different that is occurring, and it's driven by perception of opportunity. And there are some businesses who look at AI and look at it as a way, publicly traded, look at it as a way to dramatically reduce their personnel cost, because that's the promise of AI, right? Is you're not going to need all this and all that because AI is going to do it for you, right? So, if we helicopter up and ask, well, does ethics include if you're going to impact a large group of people rapidly, worldwide, negatively, is it your ethical responsibility to include them? Is it your ethical responsibility to consider that? Is it your ethical responsibility to slow down? And I would argue that driven by being publicly traded, generally can put you into a position where you're happy to be unethical, where you're happy to be more profitable because you get rewarded large, big, and fast for doing so. So the conversation about ethics is partly one about, we're in an age of dramatic disconnect between our financial systems and the actual economy and the actual well-being of human beings, and that affects ethical decisions. Decisions, I would argue, tend to be, ethics get stretched when there's big profit to be made very, very quickly. I would also say that, again, just my experience through the businesses that I'm involved in is that each industry has ethics that are human ethics, yes, but also ethics that are specific to their industry. In art and creative and entertainment, there's a ton of conversation and frankly a lot of horror around the idea of the ethics of ownership of your work and the ethics of ownership of your voice. Creatives are, I don't want to say they're a unique lot, but they're a unique lot. Creatives, their work, and I know we might have some differences of opinion on this, their work is part of their identity. It is their voice. It is who they are. You are in the business of making a body of work that represents you, and to have that absorbed with no credit, no compensation, no permission, and turned into a tool of casual fascination for everybody to actually play with, because this is part of getting you to be complicit with normalizing. There's a whole conversation to be had around normalizing. Is this normalizing, and what does normalizing mean? Because I would argue that there's, again, a lot of mythologizing around it's being normalized, and I would argue it's not. That there's plenty of places where we're seeing the rise of other things happen that speak against normalizing, but I find it both interesting and difficult to navigate the situational ethics based around profitability and benefit to smaller groups of people. So I'll pass it along.
Just a quick drop in. First, I have to admit that sometimes people ask me how I do military ethics, because it of course deals with a lot of dark and grim things. But I always say, well, it's much less depressing than corporate ethics. I'm not wrong. But I wanted to just quickly comment on your point. I am in violent agreement with you on the pushback that we need to see. And I think consumers have more power than they sometimes realize, because being complicit in buying into certain kinds of hype and buying into the inevitability language and all that pushes against what freedom and autonomy we actually have to say, no, I don't want that. I don't want that product, and I will not give you $1 gazillion for that product. And so I just want to emphasize that there's a real role for people to take the power back, because you're quite right that the companies are going to be focused on profit. That's what they do. So if you want to push back on that, you have to deny them those profits. And it's not an easy road, but that is the way forward.
I'd love to move to a question that came from a student that actually echoes the word normalizing that Kevin brought in. And I wonder if, Ashlei, this might be one that you'd be interested in addressing from your current position and your work as a writer. This comes from a student town hall. As I mentioned, it's inspiring to be here at this moment as students are addressing these issues at the level of learning and in a place where we are in the unknown. We're in problems. We're in there creatively. This question reads, what kind of message does normalizing AI usage for artistic practice send to students who are only beginning their craft, struggling to express themselves, waiting for skills to catch up with their imaginations? AI actively goes against so many practices that students are taught as artists, such as intention, theory, creativity, etc. At that point, why go to art school? Appreciate the directness and the sense of consequence to that. And I'm curious, there's a lot there. I'm curious how our panel might address some of those questions. Ashley, would you like to start us off?
So again, working at an art and design school, I hear commentary that is very similar to this often. I was telling a freshman class that I'm teaching this semester that I was coming here, and I was trying out some points with them yesterday, and they just knocked me over with their thoughts about AI. I don't agree with the direction of the question itself. Let's start with creativity. Why do you come to art and design school? One of the things that you are hoping to gain from art and design school is a depth and sophistication of creativity. The president of CIA spoke to this in her opening remarks. So what is creativity? Creativity is the generation of novel and unique and original ideas. That's creativity. So to say that the use of AI will in some way, and this is going to some of Kevin's points that he opened with the MIT study, will in some way reduce your ability to be more creative. I can't agree with that. I do not believe that AI should do the work for students, but a collaboration and a interchange and a conversation with AI will allow for greater creative depth and will allow for the use of actually more imagination and different skill building. So when we look to the future, one of the areas of research for me is futurescaping and scoping. When we look to the future, creative industries, by and large, it is argued, are going to move away from the technique as much because they are going to be using these new technologies. But they will still need a creative. They will still need an orchestrator. They will still need the individual with vision to say, this is what I want, and no, that's not it, and no, it needs to be more this. So what I think we need to do as art and design schools, and what students need to do as art and design students who hope to enter into the creative industry, and I just want to say this, ChatGPT, it became available to the public 3 years ago. Imagine what it's going to be like in 6 years, in 10 years. Look at how much has changed. So when I look at the future of creativity, and when I look at the future of art and design education, I think of things like visual literacy. I think of things like articulation, material familiarity, tool facility. You're still going to need skill without question, right? There's an intelligence in embodiment when you are utilizing skills. But I think that given the changes that we are seeing, the accelerating changes in our culture and in our society, I think that what we need to do is pull back a little bit on the technical facility. Domain skills definitely still needed, but expertise. I think that where we should be putting our efforts are in the humanities, in understanding context more, in giving more to students where they are learning about language, they're learning about where they are at in society, they are deeper into humanities, and in doing so, they will be able to collaborate with technology in the future to create worlds that we can't even imagine right now. I don't think it's giving up your creativity. I don't think it's selling out. I think that it's a way to access new levels of imagination and creativity. I think it's accessing different parts of your brain. So I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you. I bet everyone here has thoughts about this. I'd love to hear some follow-up about the nature of creativity in relation to artificial intelligence and where it might lie, and especially for student artists and designers. Who'd like to follow up further? Yeah, please, Kevin, yeah.
I think a great place, here we are, we're sitting in the Cleveland Institute of Art. And the job of the Cleveland Institute of Art is to create the very best environment for an artist, no, for a student that has talent, a student that has creativity, to begin the journey to become an artist, to find themselves. I know personally I can't discount research that was done by what I'm assuming are very competent people. But for me, I get it reinforced that bright line, which is don't use AI in any of the critical creation function, maybe most especially when you haven't formed an artist's brain yet. Artists become the first step of really being an artist when they're in college. You arrive here with talent, you have come from your immature life, and this place will challenge you. And so when and how does that happen? Well, it's part of the community. It's certainly part of the teachers, it's part of the curriculum. But where the brain really gets formed is in all of that minutia that we've been talking about, those moment-by-moment decisions where your agency lies. And I think it's important to understand the difference between the agency of minutia and a management function of the brain. When you hand over your agency, even for parts of what it is that you do, you've just made yourself a manager. You're not performing as an artist, you're performing as a manager. I have an agent, they have something, here's the results. Now what am I going to do with that result? Maybe I'll combine it with another result. One could argue there is creativity that's involved in that, but one should probably question, is that fundamentally growing the best artist that you can? For me, the answer is no. But let me also give a click here. Okay. So, again, this is from the industry that I work in. And this is growing and growing and growing. These are industry big leaders. They have spent their entire life being creative. Some of these people have founded some of the most technologically forward entertainment centers on the planet, Industrial Light and Magic. And Cameron, who just, I don't know if any of you have seen the latest movie in his Avatar series, right? I had the honor of actually getting to work with them and seeing his mind-blowing, technologically new space that he's built. So I'm saying there's a big difference between our conversation about where to use AI and being a Luddite. These people are not Luddites. I'm not a Luddite. I don't think anybody on this panel is a Luddite. So don't take my word for it. If you want a job at any of these places, and this is a small sampling, and you walk through the door with an AI-heavy portfolio, you won't get the interview. Again, this is one of the places where there's a lot of mythologizing about if you don't have AI in your portfolio, you're not getting a job. It's simply not true, and this is rising and rising and rising rapidly. But let's not stop with the industry professionals. Let's look at the audience. Many cases, and this is actually building up speed. You talked about it's your dollars, right? The people who are the fans of these things, they play the games, they play trading card games, they play video games, they watch the movies, they subscribe to Disney. There has already been a lot of, and it's growing, very significant audience backlash that says, we never wanted this, we don't want it, we don't like the look of the result, but more importantly, we stand with the artists. We want the artists. We want all the flaws. We don't care that there's flaws. I think there are times where we fetishize results and we fetishize speed. But in the world of entertainment, at least, and I can't stretch what I'm saying beyond that because that's my experience, slow is good, good is fast, fast is best. So to imagine that you need to speed up or that you need to engage with something that there's already a lot of growing proof that it's not good for your industry and maybe it's even worse for you, I think is something to be thought long and hard about. So that's my perspective to share with you on the subject.
I just want to add from another area, from the area of education, that there was, as there has been at many universities, a big push for integrating AI into various classes and so forth. And you're right, I'm not a Luddite, but I pushed back on that. And it was very funny. I have a class that I was teaching that I've taught every fall, and I told my colleagues who were very big into AI that I was going back to old-fashioned in-person blue book exams, and the students were going to do in-class presentations and things like that that were utterly AI-proof. And they said to me, oh, you're going to lose students. They're not going to sign up for that, or they're not going to stay when they find out that's the rules. And you can tell where this is going. Absolutely the opposite was true. I had a long wait list for the class, and the students who took it, we just had our last class this week, but they absolutely loved it. And somewhat to my shock, because I knew they'd put up with it, but I didn't know they would really enjoy it as much as they did. They actually used the word fun in talking about taking the exams. They were like, oh, that was fun. I haven't had to just sit there and pick my brain like that in a while. It's to your point of them wanting to connect to reality in a different way. There's a movement of younger students wanting to walk around a mall again, like we did when I was younger and so forth. I really do think that this, again, language of inevitability is misguided, because as these and many other things go, the trend is certainly strong against those waves. And there will always be people on both sides, but to suggest that everyone must get on the AI train or get run over is just not true. And it's not true in education. Obviously, it's not true in your industry, and I suspect it's not true a lot of places, including perhaps, again, surprisingly to some people, in computer science, where they're also finding that students who can't code because they've relied too much on these tools to help them are of no use. And so, again, they're rejecting people with too heavy of an AI background because they need them to have the basic coding to find what the AI did wrong.
With deep gratitude for everyone's time and interest, personally in receptions, I would like to just ask one more question that comes from students, and then one more to wrap things up on, just so people have a sense of the structure. So much is coming up, thank you all, that I'm excited to talk more afterward. Here's another question from a student that follows up on some things that were just mentioned. They say, with the current use of AI being created from stolen artwork, and massively environmentally destructive. And we could add to that list of things. We could add the elements, the issues around labor, the issues around many other things that have been mentioned. Given all of that, how is AI ethical at all? And as I told my colleagues up here by email, I just respect the scope of the question, that leap to at all, the bluntness of that. It suggests that there are conditions where there might be a threshold where things warrant some sort of outright rejection. I find that fascinating, given the multiplicity of applications that we've even touched on now. So I'm just curious how folks here might respond to that bold statement. Given all of these issues, how is it ethical at all? Would someone like to take this on?
Yeah, I mean, I think on a personal level, I think there are certainly some artists and creators out there that are finding ways of using it locally and using a controlled data set, controlled image generation to create work that isn't potentially based off of stolen and misappropriated content. But I think, every student, every professional has to kind of develop their own voice and figure out how they're charting a course through this. I mean, I think, at times I've thought about the Luddites and thinking like, do we smash this machine that is taking jobs? When I'm seeing the ramifications of it. But I think there's a big difference between art and artifice. I think when we're talking about a Coca-Cola commercial, I have less of a issue with the use of AI than if I'm going to a gallery and looking for the soul of what someone has created. So I think as long as we're maintaining the expression of soul and human identity, then I think we still have art. We're still preserving that. Photography certainly has been historically something that's been contested as an affront to the artistic craft, saying I can just take a picture of it. How is that art? And I think different artists like Donald Judd or Andy Warhol that are using either artisans to create their craft or repurposing found material. I think again, that's the beauty of being at a school where you're challenging notions and you're creating a community and developing your own way of charting your course through this, both professionally and ethically.
I agree with those points. I think I would just add that in the realm of art in particular, it makes sense to me to say that using the large platforms that I've already decried, like ChatGPT and Claude and all of those, I have real problems there. I have trouble even getting past that at all, because the level of the environmental impact, the exploitation of workers, the bias, we haven't talked much about bias, but there's a ton of that is very harmful. And then also just the blandification of everything, getting everything smushed and pushing towards a boring norm. All of that, I think, is bad. But I take the point that smaller, more localized projects are not going to be subject to those same concerns, and that's perfectly valid. I think there are some applications where people are using, because AI is such a big term, that are using some level of what might be termed artificial intelligence to do something that otherwise they couldn't express what was in their mind. That seems to me promising. And I think that's what you were talking about too, Ashley, to some degree, is this sense that there might be things that you can imagine, but you need the machine's help to bring it forward. And to that point, I would also add in the area of disability ethics, that there's quite a lot to be said about there are systems that can enable people to have a voice. You mentioned the importance of voice earlier, to have a voice who might not otherwise. So I think it is that there's that fine line. There's some movement where it can be an augmentation of an existing human creative spirit versus the erasure of it, and that seems to me there's some potential there for some ethics. But yeah, I do, especially in the area of creativity, I do come at it as being generally negative.
I'm glad you mentioned that angle, disability ethics or access that relates to that. Ashley, would you like to follow up on that any further? I was thinking of Shannon's calling back to your mention of the brain, of what can be kind of unlocked through what you termed a collaboration with AI.
I think, creativity, one of the skills related to it is divergent thinking, right? And divergent thinking, I think, can only be aided through the collaboration with AI. I do believe that. I don't, to say that, going back to what Kevin had said earlier, you identify yourself as an artist. I wonder if the holding on to those identities is not where some of this fear is coming from. And it is fear, and it's valid fear, and I respect it and I get it. But I think that this technology has so much potential. We were talking about going into hope, right? There is a possibility that in our kids' lifetimes, there will be cures for certain diseases that are only made possible through this technology. There is an opportunity. There might be a moment in my daughter's lifetime where they will ring a bell and say, no one is dying of starvation this year. That is possible through this technology. So to immediately say I have, so many issues against it that I'm not going to look at it. There's so much black and white thinking that's happening around AI, and that's where I get concerned. Yes, there are so many things we have to figure out, so many regulations that need to be put in place, and I worry that this is not the administration that's necessarily going to do that. But there is so much potential for good. And it worries me, especially with college-age students immediately pushing back against it, because they're our future. They have to be willing to at least look at the possibility of what it can do, both creatively, but also for the world at large. So I'll stop there. I'm sure other people want to talk about hope and what comes from AI.
Thank you for raising that. Let's move there. First, just thank you all again for your time and for opening up so much. I'm sure everyone who's here, thank you for being with us. Heard some things you agreed with and disagreed with, some things you'll keep chewing on. So thank you all for making it so large. We did want to end with the question of hope. Thinking hope can be hard. Hope might feel especially hard right now. I think, speaking personally, I might generally feel hopeful by disposition, but I might have trouble putting my finger on what I'm hopeful for exactly, or how to get to that. So we wanted to close with inviting others to think toward why is hope hard, and why might hope be distinctly hard at this moment, and where can you find it? in relation to AI, in relation to we're in a school of art and design. We're in the business of making and revealing worlds that we wish to inhabit together. How can we find hope in relation to this topic? Who'd like to start us off? Thanks.
I'll give it a start. So it may sound a little contrary to some of the things that I've said, but I'm actually very hopeful. Not wishful. There's a difference between wishful and hopeful. I'm actually very hopeful for several reasons. You were unpacking a little bit the students and perhaps they need to look at this a little more openly. I'm actually hopeful because I think historically, often some of the most important early beginnings and thought and movements that had to do with the human species and morality have actually come from the students. I actually think the students have engaged with the subject profoundly. I think the students have found there's very good reasons to be concerned. Part of what I'm very, very hopeful about is this is not on the trajectory that so much of the mythologizing around this has said. I'm also hopeful on the other side of the coin because I do have relatives that are in the sciences, and it's having enormous impact already on research and on the sciences and on those learnings that you did such a great job saying you think it's going to help us to solve those things. Couldn't agree more. I think it is absolutely going to do that. Speaking directly to the students at the school, the hopefulness I have is because I believe the students are in the right place. I believe that the world is sorting out where AI makes sense and where it doesn't. I also think that the discussion around where does it belong in creativity and ownership and all of those things, they're doing everything from playing through the courts. And I can tell you that internationally, there's already a lot of very significant laws being put in place that are what I would call guardrails. They're not prohibitions, they are guardrails. They are saying we can be smarter about the rollout of a technology whose intentional and unintentional results could not be a good thing at all on a scale that exceeds our first contact with a different kind of AI. So I'm very hopeful because I see the world doing that. By the way, US is far behind. US is far behind what's happening in the EU. It's far behind what Australia is doing. It's far behind what New Zealand is doing. They're not prohibiting it. They're simply saying things like, if it's going to be AI content on the internet, you have to declare it so. What a simple thing. My goodness, truth doesn't get destroyed, right? We need to go there, right? But I believe we can. I don't want to call myself an optimist, but I think there is a lot of reason for hope because there is movement in the right direction. And I do believe that that movement comes from the young, that comes from the students. It comes from all of us, certainly. Hopefully we can all be a part of it here as well. We're going to do our piece. You guys attending and considering these things, I think, is part of that. But now it's about, so where's the guardrails, right? We can put those in place. I'm actually very hopeful that we can do this smarter, and it takes public will. And as I shared with you, unlike the first rollout of AI, we are seeing a strong rise in public will. So I'm extremely hopeful about this. And the other thing I'm hopeful about is the true nature of what it means to be a creative. And I think I don't have all the answers. No one up here on the panel has all the answers. We have marvelous differences of opinions on some things, and that's what's important is for you guys and all the students to consider those things. But what I guarantee will happen is two things. One, you and many others will make decisions and you will act accordingly. Your voice matters, what you do matters, and how you vote with your dollars matters. Which is super cool, right? But it also matters what policies, institutions, and governments put in place. But that happens because of these conversations and because of human cultural movement, and we're watching it real time, which is fantastic. So what I would hope you would take away is a hopeful future for when it's applied in the right places, and a hopeful future for guardrails that help us to stop from seeing the collateral damage that we saw our first time around, only I believe it would be quite multiplied because you were talking about how much more information that AI has been called the rush to intimacy. And that's what it is. I sat in a meeting where somebody was using an AI copilot, and I got the summary from the AI copilot, and it said, Kevin was a strong voice in the meeting. And I went, what? AI is making an evaluation about my personality? And it's publishing it out to everybody else in that meeting. And by the way, that information is now in the hands of ChatGPT, and they're selling it. We have to think about these things, right? We have to think about where we're going to use it, because I do think we can be smart about it, and I do think we can use it in brilliant ways, and I don't think we know all the hundreds of thousands of brilliant ways it will be used. So I just want to end on that note.
I know, Ashley, you spoke to this a little. Is there anything you'd like to add regarding hope at this moment?
No, thank you. I think Kevin and I agree, which is great. We got there.
Thank you. Dave, any last thoughts on this for yourself?
I guess the only thing I would have is I watched a fantastic documentary last night on YouTube called Uranium, the Most Dangerous Rock. And I was talking with Ashley before we started, and I was like, wow, last night it just came to me that, like, AI is our generation's uranium, right? We can use it as a cancer cure. We can use it as a mass destruction weapon. And I think that's I'm hopeful because of discussions like this and because students are eager to figure out where those guardrails are and how to best, bring it into their own voice and practice. So I think that keeps me hopeful.
So, first, I want to make a quick point that you mentioned something earlier about improbability, and I think that's important because, as you can obviously tell, I am firmly on Team Human, and hashtag Team Human. And part of that is because I think the very unpredictability and creativity that we have is what gives me hope. It is what will, I think, save us all. I'd like to see a cure for cancer in our lifetimes too, but I put more faith in a human mind than in a system, but I think a system might help. Back to my point about augmentation. But you just don't know what humans are going to do. I mean, I'm talking here about ethics, but I could suddenly go, sleigh bells ring, are you listening? I'm just saying. You didn't expect that. But the real thing I want to end on with regard to hope is that I want to partner it with humility. And what I mean there is, because I work so much on issues that involve the military, I often have to remind people that there is an arrogance that can come with new toys. There's an arrogance that can come with technology. And if you look at past rollouts of amazing, deadly new technology in wars, people always thought that it would bring victory, and they always argued that it would. And you have arms race after arms race, and right now we're in an AI arms race. But the thing is, if you actually look at asymmetric conflicts, the ones where one side had massively more technology and that kind of material advantage than the other side, you don't necessarily find what the folks with a little bit of arrogance there might have expected. Who had more technological advantage, the US or Vietnam? Oh, yeah. Who won that war? Hello. Who had more technological advantage, the US or Afghanistan? Did we win that one? I'm serious, and I know it's not a cheerful subject, but the idea that he with the most toys or the best toys wins is factually false. And in fact, humans with their creative minds can take one look at the Boston Dynamic robot dog and say, I can hit that with one of those bolos with the balls on either end of the rope and catch its little legs, and boom, over it goes. The point is that, again, as long as we keep our minds sharp, as long as we don't get de-skilled, and we have creativity and humanity, I think Team Human is going to be just fine.
Kevin, Team Human, that's a franchise we can look forward to at some point. Please help me in thanking the panelists part of Team Human here tonight. David, Ashley, Kevin, and Shannon. A round of applause, please, for other. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for being here. We hope you'll stay. This is just the start of conversations that we'll need to continue. We hope you'll do that immediately out with us in the atrium for a reception. Say hello to the panelists, follow up on conversations, and let's bring some warmth together tonight. Thanks again for being here, everyone.